So there we have a school in Hellerup in Denmark, a school thousands of miles away in Australia, and a project, education project in India. And on the face of it, they look, of course, very different, and they are very different. But even just listening to those brief presentations, you can see some of the common themes. One is that innovation is an evolutionary unfolding process. Steve and Rajani, they're not finished, it's kind of evolving. I think all these schemes seem to have a sort of emphasis on pull, not push. How do you pull people to learning? And of course, they're all using space in innovative ways. So I just want to ask 3 questions really to the panel, and I'll start with you, Jorn, and then work through. Why did you innovate? I mean, we've spent a lot of time thinking about how we innovate and different techniques and all the rest of it. But what was the motive force for your innovation in your setting?
First of all, we had in our municipality, we had a shared vision to make some innovation which could cope with the future, a future we didn't know. So we had to find a way to go together in order to find new ways, go new steps. So what was the idea of the architect was to build a house, and not to design the furniture and inside the house, but let the users contribute to this. And they started the school, and then during the first year they knew how to design the house inside. And in this way we have a learning environment which support the idea of the to go into the single child and the learning style of the single child.
So in a sense, the why of innovation started with a community level discussion, what do we want from education, but also from an unfolding conversation with the children as they occupied the school about what it is that they would want in practice.
This is very much not only Danish but Scandinavian tradition, that and it is by law that the student's voice is to be heard. And not only in the formal level, where our students also sit in the school board. 2 of them sit in the school board together with the parents. But also on the daily level, we take in the opinion of the students in many situations. Even when I had my new job, I had to give an interview to the students before I had the job.
Right. Rajani, you're an academic. You've published all sorts of papers. What propelled you to innovate, to try and do something in practice?
I am an academic, but basically I'm a practitioner, I feel. And the reason for doing this, there are a couple of reasons. Firstly, when I was teaching in College of Social Work, I was also associated with their research unit, and I was associated with fieldwork practice of my students. So all these 3 roles which I was playing make me realize one thing definitely. One is importance of education. I'm using the word realization purposely because we all know education is very important. We know knowledge is power. We know many things about education. We talk about it, and we read about it, we hear about it many times. But realization is a different thing. For getting any motivation or passion or driving force, you have to realize. And I realized it through my contacts with people, through the research studies which I've done. For example, I have done a study for radio listeners where we were giving them radio messages for health practices. And we wanted to, UNICEF has sponsored that project, and we wanted to see whether those radio messages were effective, whether ladies who were illiterate and generally from rural areas remember or comprehend whatever is happening in the radio program and all that. And believe me, although whatever little education, even 2nd standard, 4th standard, and no education at all, there was a difference in retention and comprehension of the messages which were given on radio. Or a simple thing, I have also worked in one institution they were training functionaries of one major program which Central Government of India was running, that is integrated Child Development Services Scheme, and we used to make posters to put on the walls of, to put in villages and give messages. And in those days, that is 20 years back, Indian government was focusing more on adult education and not so much on children's education, means for out-of-school children. Schools were there. Let me tell you first, schools are there. They are within 1 kilometer or a kilometer and a half radius for every child. They are free schools. The children do not have to pay any fees, and they are open for everybody. That is there. Even then, so many children are not going to school. Now, I was talking about those posters. We made a poster where some immunization through injection was to be given. And the ladies were not able to comprehend what was it because they cannot read what was written. And then we experimented with posters, and we realized that even for a poster for us to give the message, at least a word or two are required to give you the context. So literacy is very important. And India, which boasts of so many languages, fully developed languages, scripts and everything, on our currency notes we give 14 different languages. If we have such a large population that they are not able to read even one of those 14 languages, I thought that was really shameful. But realization in terms of, this is the thing I have to do, because without this, there is no progress in public life and the private life, which has driven me to this. And another thing, that the schools were there, as I told you, but they were all traditional schools, and they were not catering to the needs of large population of children who have different needs. They reminded me of the story from Aesop's fable of Fox and the Crane. Means the food is there, but still you remain hungry. You cannot eat because it is not given in the way you can really absorb it. Thank you.
So underlying, just to be clear, your motivation partly came because of the wider health and civic benefits of education.
Right.
And secondly, because the current system is so poorly adapted to meet the differing needs of the kind of populations. And it's fundamentally a social justice, equality of opportunity kind of cause, which is your motive force.
Yes, probably.
Yeah. So Stephen, we've had, so Rajani is motivated by social cause, by inequality, by progress in civic life. Jorn started with a discussion in his community. Where did the sort of firestorm of innovation that takes place in your school, where's that come from?
Okay, now mine's far more selfish. I went to 7 schools across 3 countries and hated it. So I guess I went through a school experience, and ironically for me, I had the World Wide Web back in the 1960s. I was a child in New Zealand and managed to travel because we were so far from Europe, and with a father that needed to go to Oxford, we went by boat. And so I went to Easter Island, Christmas Island, Galapagos Island, Peru, and the world was opened to me as a 4-year-old and again as an 11-year-old. And so whenever I came back to school, now you walk through the gate and it was like you were walking into this prison. Now that's where I guess my passion has come, because ultimately I've got this vision that every child in the world not only deserves the education, but they're capable of deep engagement. And what we have to do as schools is change every structure and everything that we're doing so that every child is deeply engaged. Now, as an example of that, 2 quick things. You've got that little ad. We're working in Rwanda, so I guess it's not just in the developed world. We're trying to actually say every child can be dragged into this engagement process. You might be interested in following that one through. But we had a boy in year 10 got himself all sorts of strife to do with Facebook and photography, and I guess took that challenge on to say, how can we be innovative in our response to him? And the response was to say, okay, he has to learn, he has to understand what the rules are about the web. But we ultimately made a photography exhibition where we invited him and about another 20 difficult kids to go out and photograph Sydney and to show an exhibition that has completely changed him, because now he's a publishing photographer. He understands protocol, he understands business. So I guess it's just an example of in innovation, we have to be passionate, we have to be relentless, and we have to have a shared vision which every person in the organisation understands.
So a deeply personal kind of element to innovation. It can't just be a sort of abstract process. So just quickly, I would just want to ask you each two questions before bringing in the rest of the room. So briefly, if you could, just thinking about what you've innovated. You've obviously innovated partly in the design of buildings, but also in style of teaching, in tools for learning, in kind of curriculum and so on and so forth. If you look across all the things that you've innovated, what is the single most important thing, if you were to boil it down? What is the most important thing that you've focused on? Starting with you, Jorn.
I think, well, we have to follow the same curriculum as all other schools in Denmark. And our children go to the same exams and they do the same results. But what is different is that we have another relation between the child and the teacher. And that means that the teacher is the autonomous teacher team, we call it. They use a lot of time to prepare the teaching, the learning situations for the single child. But in the way we work, there are not a big distance between the grown-up and the child. And that gives the child a great motivation, and it opens also up for new ideas from the children to the situation. And we always say, like one of our well-known philosophers in Denmark, Kierkegaard, he said, when we want to learn, we have to walk the mountain up together. Not the teacher standing on the mountain, teaching down to the child. So we walk the mountain together, and this is a big difference, I think.
So that's a great philosophy, walk the mountain together as a way to learn. Rajani, what's been the single most important? People will focus on the buses because they look tangible, but that's not the most important bit of what you do, is it?
For me?
Yeah.
No, of course not. That is only one way of reaching out to children. The most important thing we do is that we look at, just now today morning only we have heard the word whole reform. So same way we are looking at the primary education at our organization as the whole thing. And that is the only thing which we do. They address three major problems, that is non-enrollment, wastage and stagnation. Children not going to school, dropping out early and not achieving as much as they are expected to achieve. Now for that we have different types of services. Maybe some time back we have shown some pictures here. And the most important thing we are doing is adjusting to the children's needs in everything, in curriculum, in what we teach them, the way we teach them, the way we reach out to them, and whatever we could do for them. The bus is only one of the examples which is very visible, which gives us a lot of publicity, and which is like our flagship, this thing. But that is not the real innovation as such. It is only another way of reaching out to children. We use many different ways.
Stephen.
Okay,
Quickly.
The focus for me would be, why talk about education in 2025 or 2021? It should actually be now. We have to make the changes now. So for me, I have this hunch that that schools of the future will become niche education providers where you've got functional relational communities, and within that community your kids are choosing blended online, face-to-face, whatever the process is. So therefore what we focus on is creating that holistic environment where you've got the whole community together, focus on relationships and being functional, but then you also have the capacity to meet the diverse needs of every child in a niche context. So I guess it's breaking down the old separate classroom, separate teacher model and actually creating a holistic new learning village model. That's what we're focused on.
Thank you very much indeed to our panel, who I'm going to ask to leave the stage now. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you all.